Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. Today, we've prepared two brand new stories, starting with one in which we tell an extraordinary story about a stolen dog. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here, and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. Don't mess with Real Big Toby. I adopted a full-bred husky in the Pacific Northwest. We named him Toby, but after a while, he developed the name Real Big Toby. He wasn't a huge husky or Malamute, but boy did he look beautiful. And boy was his personality real big. He had one blue eye and one brown eye, which never failed to trip people out. On top of that, he was a huge ham, loved attention, and would actually talk to you about how his day was going. It got to the point where it was kind of stupid to put him on a leash. I'd tell him to stay when I went into class, for example, and he'd be passed out or getting the chicks to scratch his belly when I came out. Every time. The dean of the college even knew him on a first-name basis and started to bring his dog into work after watching Real Big Toby do his thing. At the time, I lived in a mountain town, attended college, and was an avid mountain biker, so having a dog that would happily and easily do 30 miles in a day was cool. He'd follow us everywhere we went. My mountain bike was my only source of transportation, so we became very in tune with one another. He was a husky after all, so you could tell when he ran that this was exactly what he was born to do. Toby was such a super good boy. He listened, paid attention, and never left my side. He had a seat designated for him on the deck at the local coffee shop, which meant you had to walk by him and try to resist giving him a scratch if you wanted to go inside. It got to the point where just about everyone in this fairly small town got to know Toby on a first-name basis. Every once in a while, on mountain bike runs, we'd get separated, or Toby would just get sidetracked on the way down the hill. It was such a small town that in the few times it happened, he was back with me by the end of the day. The police all knew him from around town. The pound knew him, so if anyone called, they'd just give them my number. One day it happened again. He got lost on the way down the hill, only this time he didn't come back. No call. Nothing for days. It got to the point where I started asking around town. If you ever lived in a small town, you know it's hard to keep a secret. After about a week, a friend said he saw Toby and tracked the guy down and gave him my number. He never called. After searching, trying to find this guy, I finally got a breakthrough. He worked at the college. Now, I'm aware how stupid people can be when they receive an animal. Toby was ripped. You could see the muscles bulging out of his fur. He didn't have an ounce of fat on him because, you guessed it, he was in excellent shape. I fed him mostly a raw diet, and what kibble he did get was the best you could buy. The first thing out of this guy's mouth was to tell me that he's keeping my dog. You don't take care of him. You don't even feed him, and he's such a good dog. He'll be better off with me, he said. I became enraged. Well, like I mentioned, he worked at the school I attended. I also mentioned the dean hammed it up with Toby on a nearly daily basis. I didn't mention I had the dean's home number, so a call Saturday morning resulted in Toby being returned to me later that day. This guy had the nerve to, along with Toby, bring me a 50-pound bag of the crappiest store brand of dog food you could buy. I bought this so you could feed him. Rage. Come to find out, this guy was in charge of a research project for the school. It was very easy to figure out where his office was. I went to his office with a plan of returning his food and chewing him out in front of his colleagues. He wasn't at his desk, so I did the most natural thing I could possibly do. I turned the 50-pound bag of dog food upside down on his desk, computer, stacks of papers, to the point where it formed a perfect mountain on top of his keyboard. Truly an awesome sight. Knowing how loose lips sink ships, I didn't tell anyone but my close friends. The school brought misconduct charges against me, the hearing in front of a board of other students and staff, and, well, I don't know what happened to the bag of dog food. I was telling the story to a bunch of guys, and one of them asked me for the bag. That's the last I saw it. All charges were dropped. The a-hole that tried to steal Real Big Toby had it much worse. 50 effing pounds of dog food on top of your research project, as it turns out, doesn't bode well with management. For reasons unknown, 2 days later, he was fired from the college. Not only did they fire him, but put a restraining order on him and had to change the locks to the building. Don't mess with Real Big Toby. And our next story. Do your job and get me what I'm entitled to. My law school offers free legal advice and representation service to low-income earners in the city. We, the students, volunteer in this service and help people with their cases. Most of our cases are related to contracts, employment, tenancy, wills, or petty crime, and we're limited by our mandate to not provide support for anything too intensive, e.g. jail time, possibility, divorce, automobile accidents, etc. Anything we send out to clients or third parties must go through our supervising lawyers. Also keep in mind, most of the students, including me, are volunteers going through full-time law school and have jobs outside of the classroom. So working on the files usually takes a bit of time. One of my clients, M, came in with what seemed like a simple case. She told me that she was being evicted by her landlord without being provided sufficient notice, and as such, wanted to get compensated. A week goes by and I got working on her file, doing research on our local residential tenancy statutes, and calling her a few times to iron out the details. The landlord had given the tenant notice in November 2017 on a handwritten slip of paper, which technically isn't the proper way to serve notice, about the fact that the unit is needed for a family member to move in by February 1st. At this point, it was already mid-January and getting close to the move-out date of January 31st. Our local statutes provided that landlords must give 2 months' notice in the proper form prior to terminating the rental for occupation, as well as 1 month free rent to the tenant. So I get on the phone with them and tell her she can either refuse the notice and continue the tenancy since it wasn't served properly, or she can move out and we'll get her 1 month free rent. At this point, she completely changes her tone and demands that we ask for 2 months of free rent. Apparently, it takes her that long to find a new place, get her damage deposit back before moving out, and have the landlord pay for her moving fees. I told her that's basically not possible since she's not entitled to that by law, and she starts flipping out at me over the phone, telling me how her landlord is a crazy person and we're totally useless if we can't claim what's fair for her. So I tell her I need to meet with the SL next week to discuss the situation. The SL essentially tells me that my assessment is accurate and that we can't make claims that run counter to the law. Pretty obvious. But before I could call her in the afternoon, she calls me through our switchboard, routed through to me. It turns out she called like 4 times that day, and tells me she's freaking out because her landlord served a 10-day eviction notice on her door. The eviction notice was for failure to pay rent for January, which is a valid and totally separate eviction claim. M never told me she withheld rent for January. At this point, we were basically 3 days away from January 31st. Due to this new notice, we can no longer argue the tenancy was still in effect since she'd still get kicked for non-payment. The only remedy was to argue that the 1 month of rent was withheld because M had expected to move out by the end of January. So I tell M she needs to get out of there by January 31st if she wants to protect herself, and we'll help her communicate with the landlord and ask for the January withholding to be in lieu of the 1 month free rent. Lo and behold, February rolls around and she was still occupying the unit into the first week of the month. So the landlord filed a second eviction notice for failure to pay rent for February. She's now 2 months behind rent and facing 2 valid eviction notices, one of which is coming up in 3 to 4 days. So she's pretty screwed. If she's evicted due to non-payment, she'll get absolutely nothing, not even the 1 month free rent. The best course of action is that she needs to pay her January rent to satisfy the January notice, and we can continue to claim the 1 month free rent for February, which is already pushing it in the eyes of the law, and hopefully keep her from becoming homeless in the next week. I get on the phone with her again to tell her she needs to pay a month of rent. She begins to shout at me over the phone and essentially tells me I'm crazy and incompetent and in a conspiracy to side with the landlord. She says she absolutely refuses to pay a cent to the landlord and that she deserved 2 month rent and deposit returned immediately and moving fees covered. She said, and I quote, "I know the laws of the place. I can read too, you know. Obviously, you guys don't want to help me because you think it's too hard. Don't lie to me. I know what I deserve in this situation, so just do your job and get me what I'm entitled to, or else I'll do it myself." I said, "Okay, ma'am, I've already told you what you're entitled to, and you don't want it. So I'm going to do my job, which is to follow the law." I hung up and had a quick 5-minute chat with the SL. He backed me and said that he gets at least 1 or 2 of these types of people each year and told me to draft a letter to M and close the file. So I drafted a short and sweet letter and basically told her, following your instructions, we're ceasing to provide any further representation. Our organization is mandated to comply with the law, And upon being informed of this, you've elected for self-representation. Good luck on your legal issue. SL approved within minutes and had it sent out. About a week later, I receive an email from M. It's filled with expletive insults and one sentence that reads, "You and everyone at your organization are useless and will never be good lawyers. I thought you all smart, but tell your SL and worthless friends that they're better off planting potato because all of you can only be potato farmers." I had a good chuckle in class and never heard from her again. P.S. No potato farmers were hurt in the telling of this experience. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.